Yeah, so Pritchett, this is an audacious thumbnail. What are we doing here today?
Well, late last month, I think around February 21st, the Executive Committee of the Southern Baptist Convention decided to formally disfellowship Saddleback and a few other churches for having ordained women pastors. These churches, I think, were referred to in the 2022 annual meeting of the Southern Baptist for the Executive Committee to decide on. Well, they did last month. And then, after that made the news or whatever, caught wind of a conversation that Rick Warren had with Russell Moore, Christianity Today. And he had said that he was probably going to appeal this decision and wanted to kick up a fuss. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about today and some of the points that he had made. Because, as you know, you're a complementarian, but I'm an egalitarian. So I actually side with Rick Warren's position on this for Saddleback. But I do take issue with what he's doing, and I'm not actually a fan. And I've said this many times when I stream with Nick. If you want to know like my position on that and how we exegete,
we have a whole episode, several whole episodes.
Yeah, especially on Trinity Radio Extra. There's hours of me and Nick going through that, and you will hear me say there, and I'll say again today, so it's not news flash. I'm not a big fan of all egalitarians and how they argue for the position, and so we're going to actually. Two of us, one complementarian, one egalitarian, are going to kind of critique his defense of that. But before we get into that, we do want to kind of give a little bit of context to what Rick Warren had said. And I got wind of this on Twitter because Braxton encouraged me to get on Twitter more.
Real quick. I'm sure anyone watching this, Pritchett, probably already knows this, but just in case you don't, Rick Warren is a Southern Baptist, or was a Southern Baptist Convention pastor. His church, Saddleback Church, is massive. I think he said it's baptized more people than any single church in the history of the United States or something like that. History of the world,
history of the planet,
something like that. But and he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, which I think sold more copies than anything but the Bible or something. And I wanted to say at the start of this so the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, has ousted Rick Warren's church, Saddleback, which comprise, I think there are 6,000 related churches or something that are all. Am I getting this right, Pritchett? There are all these 6,000 churches that are affiliated with him and are also affiliated with the SBC.
Yes.
And so we're going to talk about what Rick Warren said about that. But I did want to say right from the beginning that Rick Warren has done incredible things for the kingdom and has, I mean, like I say, this book, Purpose-Driven Life alone, there are stories around it. Like, people have their own testimonies about how this book has changed their life. One famous example, I don't remember any of the details, but you can Google it. There was a woman who was like kidnapped or being held captive in her home, and she read the Purpose-Driven Life out loud to her captor, and he became a Christian, turned himself in, and let her go. So there are amazing things that have come out of his ministry, but that doesn't mean that we can't criticize aspects of how an individual functions. So with all of that, hopefully people are caught up on who these people are, what's happening.
And I like Rick Warren. I've never been one of those guys that gets upset with people like Rick Warren or Andy Stanley or all these people. There's a lot of hype. But you got me on Twitter, and so I caught wind of an article by Denny Burke who was saying, well, actually, this interview he did with Russell Moore is doing us a favor. Lets us get ready for the convention. So when he tries to, hear the arguments they're going to make and all that, and there were some interesting quotes in that, which maybe go check out the whole interview. But Rick Warren, he starts with a quote.
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah. He says, in my heart of hearts, I just want to walk away from it. You don't want to be where you're not wanted, right? Okay. I knew last year at the convention, but I don't think I can do that. I think it's a selfish thing to do. I think I need to stand up for the pastors who are scared to death by this inquisition. And I think I need to stand up for the millions of godly women whose gifts and leadership skills are being stymied. So I'm going to most likely appeal it, not for my benefit. We don't need it. We don't need the Southern Baptist Convention. They need the 6,000 purpose-driven churches that are in the Southern Baptist Convention and our fellowship. But we don't need the convention. But it would be for the benefit of others, not us. Now, I'm a cynical guy.
What?
I mean, and I'm saying, when I see something like that, I don't need y'all, but y'all need us. I'm kind of like...
Well, let's just appreciate the boldness in a statement like that.
Yeah,
right?
I do appreciate the boldness.
There's nothing wrong with saying it if it's true and necessary.
But I don't think it's true and necessary that the Southern Baptist Convention doesn't need any one single... I mean, there's like, 44,000 churches in the SBC?
Well, 44,000 minus 6,000 would be quite a dramatic change. They wouldn't like that very much. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Well, number one, it's not like he beamed his Sunday service into all 6,000 of these churches. These are all their own churches that are in that fellowship, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that all of them are going to leave or have left simply because he got disfellowshipped a few weeks ago.
Be a good thing to know, yeah.
So I'd like to know that first. Are they all
Either way, he does represent 6,000 churches that are SBC affiliated in some sense. They're affiliated with him in some sense. He started them, planted them, whatever.
Yeah, but I don't know that they would all go just because he did on this. That's kind of a bit, that's almost cult leader-ish to me in a sense that since I'm disfellowshipped, I'm taking these people with me, right?
Well, I get what you're saying, and obviously the nice cop over here is going to be like, right. But I'm just saying, as the person kind of representing the other side here, and we'll get to, somebody says, why is he ousted? It has to do with women serving in a pastoral position. But when we're going to talk about that too, a little bit. But it's just to say it is relevant to get the facts on the table if you're going to try to actually appeal something, make a difference. And the facts that he's going to lay on the table, it's not irrelevant that I got a whole bunch of Southern Baptists that may side with me, and we have more reason.
Well, that's the key. But that's not what he said.
But that's true.
He said you don't need us and the 6,000 churches that are both you, but they're also me.
You think he's being presumptuous to speak on their behalf?
I don't know what their arrangement is. If they're like, are they obedient churches, or are they like just kind of how they cooperate? I don't know the ins and outs of all that. I would be surprised if they weren't their own autonomous churches, though, that don't have to bend the knee to Rick Warren's ring and kiss it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But But
either way, it seems like, come on, man, why are you throwing that out there?
Right.
Type thing. Maybe because you just ousted me.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I don't. But my thing is, I don't know that all of them would leave just because he got this fellowship.
Right. Okay. Well, that point is down. Go ahead.
Okay. The next point I want to say is, I'm doing this for all of those other churches who might be afraid. Well, the way I see it is, the Southern Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist Convention is a bunch of autonomous churches, right? Mm-hmm. And what I understand is, there's no mystery about what the Southern Baptist Church believes in its Baptist faith and message. And yes, of course, not every church has to affirm that. Not every member of the Southern Baptist
Church. Baptist Convention has a statement, the Baptist faith and message. The most recent one is from 2000. Yeah. And it lays out a list, it lays out the theological and doctrinal positions that
most Southern Baptists
hold, and there are very few things that are just like distinctives of Southern Baptists.
Right. The two that come to mind, I say that, there's like tons of Baptist denominations out there. And I think the eternal security issue and the complementarianism are the two things that they hold in distinctive that are probably different than several other Baptist traditions. Mm-hmm. Free will Baptists, for example, the General Baptists, they reject eternal security. There might, Missionary Baptists, I don't know if they have a statement about that or not. I don't know. I haven't read their statement. But there's like all kinds of Baptists. But like where I'm from in Arkansas, you got Free Will Baptists and you got Southern Baptists. And they differ on eternal security. But that's one of the issues. And then, of course, complementarianism is one of the issues that makes Southern Baptists. So all these millions of women.
And complementarianism and egalitarianism have to do with roles that men and women have.
Right.
Egalitarians will think that men and women can serve in the same roles in church. Obviously, they recognize differences between men and women, obviously. But I should say, obviously, in this culture, it should be obvious. And then complementarians say no, that they have different. They're equal in value before the Lord, but they complement each other in terms of roles.
Right.
They don't have the same roles
and
necessarily.
So there's no mystery what the SBC believes, and so when he says he's speaking up for millions of women, well, if the issue is ordained as pastor, there's millions and millions of men and women in the SBC that are not wanting to become pastor, right? But there are all sorts of things that both men and women can do in ministry in a complementarian denomination like the SBC. So I don't know what.
So what did he do that got him kicked out? Go ahead, because people are asking.
What did he do to get?
Denise, and if C. Denise asks anything, it's immediately deserves to get answered.
Yes, he ordained. I think it was like a husband and wife team to be like co-lead pastors of a church
after him or something.
Yeah,
or one of the churches
to take over.
I think the main church, Saddleback, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's several women in different positions of ministry that. Some Southern Baptist churches will have a children's minister that's a woman, and
but that's why she asked, did he ordain them?
Yeah.
Or just place them in associate pastor position?
Yeah. I think he ordained them as pastors, which I think there's a conversation to be had. At this church, the children's pastor is a children's pastor. He gets the word pastor because it's a dude, but at this Southern Baptist church, she'll get, because she's a woman, and I think that's goofy. And so I understand, and part of what he was complaining about, getting hung up about labels, but that's not the issue. The issue is the role of like elder pastor type officer of the church. And again, I believe, like Rick Warren does, that women can hold that position, but the Southern Baptist Convention does not affirm that. And so I don't know what he means by he's going to speak up for like all of these people that are intimidated by this or whatever, as if there's like this legion of quiet egalitarians in the SBC. Now, I know that there are some discernment ministry bloggers who probably think that there's this whole cabal of secret egalitarians out to destroy the Southern Baptist Convention.
Well, out to destroy, I don't know about that, but I would not be surprised to find out that
that's how they would say it.
Particularly among younger pastors, it's probably more prevalent than it used to be.
Probably more prevalent than it used to be, but do those churches, are they just out there ordaining women left and right? No. Are they not ordaining women because they're all stymied in fear and intimidation? I don't think so. I think most Southern Baptists actually agree with that, and I think that a lot of these women that he's claiming to speak for, I think we were talking earlier about male saviorism kind of being a thing. Like, I'm going to go stick up for all these millions of women that... I don't know that there's millions of anybody in the SBC trying to be pastors, but I do believe that these women can think for themselves, and if they agree with your wife,
you think it's insulting in some sense.
A little bit, yeah, because like
these women in SBC churches couldn't. Your position is, at least all things being equal, like there are circumstances where perhaps there's abuse or certain kind of control going on or whatever, but your position is, if these women hold that position or think it's probably true, and they recognize that their church, that they can look around and recognize, okay, my church believes this, but I think the Bible says this, so why don't I go to a different church? Right. Now, I pushed back a little bit on that before the show with you, because I can kind of see it being the case, and I cover things like this in my book, Letters to Ignorantia, or From Ignorantia. And I can't remember the title, but this notion that
ask your ghostwriter, right?
Yeah, ask my ghostwriter. She'll have to inform me. It's a woman. She can say that way. If anybody ever takes offense, like, well, a woman wrote it. Yeah. But anyway, what am I saying? Oh, woman in the SBC. So if she decide, I think I could see a lot of people, male and female, who are just kind of like, they're Christians and they do mean it, but they're not professional ministers. And even though you and I would say, and a lot of our viewers would say, no, they need to be studying the Bible. They need to be going deeper. And of course, that's what we want. But they do love Jesus, and they are trying. But here's the thing. They're not aware of all of these nuanced doctrinal positions. And sometimes they do just kind of let things kind of wash over them, and they take it in passively, some of this theology. And so a woman may just take it that, well, I trust my church, and this is their view on this, and so I guess it's not for me.
I don't think it's necessarily, unless you're in a cult, that it's a bad thing that you trust your typical Southern Baptist pastor, that he's not intentionally trying to... See, I don't think any Southern Baptist pastor, like, you are a complementarian Southern Baptist pastor. Mm-hmm. You weren't trying to steer women away from either learning about other positions or trying to sinister, twirl your mustache, trying to keep them from ever discovering this truth that, oh, you really could be a pastor. But, I mean, you're not out to get them. They should trust you. right? I mean, and if you don't agree with
well,
your
they can
pastor,
trust that I'm definitely telling them what I absolutely
but
believe.
I think
is
women
true.
are, capable of coming to their own conclusions about those things, insofar as they've ever thought about it. And since most women don't think about I want to be a pastor anyway, because most people in churches don't think about that, how big of an issue are we talking about here? Even in your scenario, that there might be that one that's being held in the dark,
or has a real hard-nosed husband or father who has given them the impression that it is like that she cannot question these sorts of things, and so she's put in a weird situation, which we're all put in at one time or another, but not quite this situation, where she has to feel like she's doing something wrong if she thinks maybe I should break with my denominator. I don't know. Let me get to Jim Amberg first, because he's the channel angel.
Yes, he is.
And thank you for that, Jim Amberg. He doesn't even like for us to mention it when he does that. And then I also wanted to get to someone who I think nailed what you were trying to say, but now I don't know what I...
Well, while you find that, I just want to say, our good friend, the New Testament theologist, Nick Quint's probably going to be screaming at the screen to see an egalitarian take up for complementarians, but that's what I'm doing today. I'm taking up for the complementarians today.
Caleb says, I think it's pretty simple. He entered an agreement with the SBC and knew their guidelines. He broke them and suffers the consequences. It's because so the Baptist faith and message, well, go on with you have a plan for walking through this.
We'll bring up the next quote.
Okay. Bye, Caleb. All right. Here you go.
Southern Baptists have always been anti-creedal. Go read the preamble of the Baptist Faith and Message, which it says this is not binding on anybody. It says it in the preamble. This is not binding on any church. But now we're turning it a confession into a creed, and we're weaponizing it. We're starting an inquisition. But this is actually not true. This is something that Denny Burke pointed out. Look at me siding with Denny Burke, a person that probably disagree with me on Calvinism, egalitarian, all numerous things. But he brought up the fact, bring up the SBC Constitution. Now, that's Article 3 of the SBC Constitution says composition. The convention, that's the Southern Baptist Convention, shall consist of messengers who are members of Baptist churches in cooperation with the convention. The following subparagraphs describe the convention's current standards and method of determining the maximum number of messengers the convention will recognize from each cooperating church to attend the convention's annual meeting. 1. The convention will only deem a church to be in friendly cooperation with the convention and sympathetic with its purposes and work, i.e. a cooperating church, as that term is used in the convention's governing documents, which, and here's the key point, I think Denny Burke was right to highlight this, has a faith and practice which closely identifies with the convention's adopted statement of faith. By way of example, churches which act to affirm, approve, or endorse homosexual behavior would be deemed not in cooperation with the convention. So it says by way of example, right? That's just one issue. Mm-hmm. Now, the Baptist Faith and Message does take a position on this, and it does take a position on women pastors. And so
it's kind of like Caleb said. It's like, look, man, you are a part of an organization, and you affirmed what that organization affirms until 3 years ago, because he had this change of heart about the doctrine 3 years ago. And so you used to be a part of this, you agreed with this, and then all of a sudden, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but one day you decided that's not where I am anymore. And it looks to people like Caleb and to me to a certain degree like, well, I'll just change the organization then.
Right. And so I see, as much as I'm an egalitarian.
Wait, before you go on, you'll be glad I did this, because here is Derek.
Our good friend Derek.
And Derek says, my good friend Sarah, great name, Sarah with an H. I got a Sarah with an H, is a first-time listener today. Can she get a shout-out? Sarah! There it is. She got a ministry directed towards the New Age and ex-New Agers.
Nice.
That is fantastic. That's something you can get on board with.
Yes, and joining up with the likes of like Melissa Doherty and doing the Lord's work and that. That's awesome. Way to go, Sarah.
We are all for you, Sarah, and perhaps we can have you on sometime. And Derek, thank you for that super chat.
So I would love for the SBC to be egalitarian, because I think that's the correct position, but they're not. You know what? And because they're not, they have more important to me than how I feel, how you feel, how Rick Warren feels about secondary issue. The question is not, are they right or wrong about the doctrine? The question is, does the Southern Baptist Convention have the right to determine the boundaries of cooperation?
Jonathan, and here's a point that should maybe have been one of the first points made is, look, if it is the case, like whether you agree or disagree about the theological point, right? Because you agree with Rick Warren and disagree with the Southern Baptist Convention on the theological point of women as pastors, all right? But you're saying there's a right and a wrong way to handle your new belief about that, right? And it seems to me that even if you agree with him about this, we do not want to set up a situation where 40-something thousand churches and millions of people suddenly are faced with a denominational wide change in what how their denomination functions, all because one person who had a huge following was able to come in and put pressure and make such a change. I mean, think about what that could do in 20 years from now with gender ideology and things like that.
Right. I was about to say, it smacks of the same kind of almost narcissistic behavior to say, I believe this, and because I believe this particular thing, everyone else needs to change the way that they interact with me because of my personal belief. Yeah. And that's what Rick Warren's saying. 40, or let's give him a 6, 38,000 SBC churches need to change the way that they understand cooperation because I changed my mind about something.
So we got Chris Tate. Let's say Chris Tate is a Southern Baptist. Chris Tate's a YouTuber, professor, all those things, and has a big following. Let's say Chris Tate is a member of the Southern Baptist Convention, and man, they love him. He's got all the stuff, that they want. But then one day he has a change of heart about the nature of hell, as he did, and he accepts this view called conditional immortality. And let's just say that the Baptist Faith and Message actually ruled that out.
Yeah.
Okay. And Chris Tate suddenly has this change of heart, and he really believes this is important, right? And he does. But then he says, everybody, now I'm so convinced that this is important, and so convinced that so many people are living under the fear of eternal conscious torment wrongly, that I'm going to, or actually he wouldn't say that, but I'm going to try to ensure that this whole denomination changes because of this new view that I've come to adopt.
Right. That's just, there's a little bit of.
Do we want that going forward?
No, we don't. I think there's a little. Oh, and by the way, the New Age to Jesus Diaries. I guess that's the name of Sarah's channel. Everyone, go check out the channel.
Check it out.
And subscribe if it's good. Right. Mm-hmm. Or subscribe anyway. That's what I say. Even I've told so many people, subscribe to Theology Geek Fitness, even if you never watch a video.
Well, here's the thing: you don't want people to subscribe to your channel if you know they're not going to watch it, because then that just doesn't work for you in the algorithms and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how YouTube works. So
it's a great mystery.
You don't try to make everyone change their beliefs about cooperation simply because you think you need to still be included. Because on the other side of, I'm going to take me and my 6,000 churches away from you, we're going to, we don't need you, but you need us. The flip side of that is the Southern Baptist Convention is so committed to their belief, right or wrong, they're committed to it that they're willing to lose that.
Well,
that's admirable too. That's like, no, I mean, we don't want you guys to go, but this is our doctrinal statement. This is our standard of cooperation, and so props to the SBC for being willing to lose that over their conviction. I don't think their conviction is right. You think that they're right.
But you understand why they hold it, and you
I understand why they hold it, and I admire them for saying, what if we lost all 6,000 churches? This is our conviction. Until we change this Baptist Faith and Message and to require in our Constitution that you need to be, within the bounds of that for cooperation, at least loosely,
This is the problem that is often faced from people in the religious realm. I'm not saying this is about Rick Warren, but when people think about denominations and how they work and about evangelicalism as opposed to other things, like sometimes, like some people in the in more left-leaning churches and things like that,
like mainline Anglican, Episcopalian type stuff.
It's just that we really mean it, and I'm not saying they don't mean it. I'm saying when we look at our standards, we mean it. We believe this stuff is real. We think it's backed up by reasons to believe that it's true. And so as a result of that, we take it seriously, even if it hurts people's feelings and works against what appears to be our own self-interest in the moment.
Yeah.
And I realize that seems shocking and not it may not seem inclusive or something, but you have to have convictions and you have to stand by them. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
And it's okay for SBC to be complementarians. I'm an egalitarian, but I'm telling you, it's okay to be a complementarian. It's okay to be an annihilationist. It's okay to affirm eternal security. It's okay to be a Calvinist. But if, like, you're trying to be a Methodist, like the good kind, and you're a Calvinist, maybe not going to work. So why would you even want to go there, right?
Well, somebody said this a while ago. I think it was Jim Amberg. So Jim, let's see, is he the one that said it? But basically he said that I was at a Calvinist church, or maybe he says he goes to a Calvinist church. I don't know. And so as a result, he doesn't make a stink about it. It's fine. Well, if I had a Calvinist pastor, to this day, ever since I pastored in my 20s, to this day, some of those people and some of the people from churches I've been to ask me this occasionally, like, I have a Calvinist pastor and I'm not a Calvinist. What do I do? Well, keep going to church. I mean, this is your brother. This is your sister, right? These are your brothers and sisters. And so why would you? Now, this is what I tell them. If that fact, and I'd say this to a Calvinist who's in a non-Calvinist church, if that fact is going to, if you can deal with that and eat the chicken and spit out the bones where you happen to disagree and live peacefully there and function in the church in the ways that you're supposed to function in the church and receive what you're supposed to receive from the church. If you can do all that, then who cares that he's a Calvinist?
Right.
On the other hand, if you're going to cause a stink, if you, as the non-Calvinist who agrees with me, are going to bring this up every chance you get because you just can't take it, then maybe don't go to that church anymore.
Yeah, so my example is, like, not all Calvinist churches are the same. Like my friend John Winters, childhood friend, he was pastor of Remount, I was the outreach pastor, right? He knew I was not a Calvinist. Mm-hmm. He didn't care. I still preached, one Sunday every 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. Mm-hmm. He would say, hey, you preach this Sunday. I want to hear you preach or whatever. You take this Sunday. And of course, usually I wasn't necessarily preaching on a text that dealt with election or predestination or foreknowledge or anything like that anyway. Mm-hmm. And so like 90% of both of our sermon content, it didn't matter. Like, well, I nitpick every sermon, but that's besides the point. But you know what I'm saying? I didn't have like serious doctrinal hang-ups, and he didn't have hang-ups with anything I was saying on text unrelated to that debate. And he didn't care. He's happy for me to preach and take the Sunday off, not just sit and listen to a sermon. But there are other Calvinist churches or non-Calvinist churches that might have a problem with letting anyone with anything, because, they might say certain buzzwords, they might like, I don't want you smuggling in your understanding of sovereignty if it's like a provision that's just ate up about a Calvinist preacher. Or, I don't want you talking about free will unless we're compatibilists and what you mean by free will. So if they're not, but not, I think most people, like pastors, aren't ate up about that. It's like, a non-Calvinist comes in, okay, cool, he's going to preach on Philippians 3 or something. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Jim Amberg says, you quietly sing hymns in your head when they're on Romans rants, not related to the sermon topic. Other than that, you do what everyone else is doing.
There you go.
That's how you get through.
See, it all depends on the church thing. But when we're talking about a denomination, and the overwhelming majority of the denomination said in 2000, these are the things that we're going to... And again, the SBC wrote the Baptist Faith and Message to be intentionally non-specific on certain hang-ups and things, which we will talk about more later. But this they're pretty clear about, right? Mm-hmm. And in their constitution, they say they just use homosexuality, which is specified in the thing, as one example, but there is other examples in the Baptist Faith and Message that distinguish them, that they take a pretty clear position on. And so they have the right to decide, in my opinion. And I think Rick Warren is making a bad move thinking he's going to appeal this.